Good afternoon, everybody. I just thought I'd give you a moment to all drop in before we start the event today. Thank you all for joining us. We think this is going to be a really special event today, so thank you again for joining. We hope you're enjoying Back in Britain Live as well, visiting our exhibitor stands. Hopefully you are all visiting stands and having a look at our members with over 200 exhibitors. So yeah, today is going to be another great event, number 5. Brilliant. Okay, so we've hit 12 o'clock now. So welcome to Back in Britain Live with our special guest today, Dr. Andy Palmer. So just before we get started, I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about Andy before I pass you over to him. So Andy is the chairman of the board at Optare PLC and former CEO of Aston Martin. As CEO of Aston Martin for 6 years, Andy's dream was to challenge the erosion of British industry, something the Made In Group also strives to do every day. So this is why we feel it's going to be a very special event today. With extensive knowledge in the automotive sector, Andy will be focusing his speech on the future of the automotive industry in the UK. So I won't hold you any longer and I'll pass you straight over to Andy. So thank you again, guys, for joining.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay now. So it's a real honor to speak to you today on a subject that's very close to my heart, the future of the automotive industry in the United Kingdom. However, before we get there, let's start with the global automotive industry in general and set a picture. This is an industry fundamentally challenged even prior to COVID-19. In a period of massive change, which is primarily driven by external factors forcing that change. Change is being driven by many influences. It's hard to put them into any order, but I would suggest that perhaps the most profound is the changing customer expectations. The most obvious is the emerging Gen Z or Gen Z consumer who view cars more like appliances. Nearly 56% agree that a car represents essentially no more than a means of transportation. Some 70% of Gen Z consumers do not even have their driving licenses, and up to 30% have no intention or desire to get one. In fact, Gen Z surveys respondents actually rank alternative reality, virtual reality, and smart homes higher in interest than vehicles, even autonomous ones. However, the good news, those who make up Gen Z or Gen Z do see autonomous vehicles as an eventual reality. Some 60% believe that they will be using autonomous vehicles by 2029. The implication of these insights are far-reaching. The industry needs to immediately rethink how to excite Gen Z consumers and those that follow about transportation options. Automakers should complement or replace attributes of car coolness, such as horsepower, towing capacity, and even fuel economy, with new features such as productivity, shared time, or total experience. Gen Z has shown an early willingness to invest money and loyalty into brands that demonstrate an ability to align marketing to those new values synonymous with the mobility culture. Take Madrid, for example, with more than 5,000 electric scooters available for on-demand use as a means to cut down on traffic, noise, pollution, and parking issues. Young Spaniards flock to these options, with companies increasing the size of the fleet more than 5-fold in the past year. As I said, the changing customer dynamic is but one of the changes facing the auto industry. Technology, environmental considerations, and legislation are all imposing change. These Gen Z vehicle owners lead the charge towards electric vehicles more than any other generation. But combine that growing demand with growing legislation and the technology push of new entrants, and you have the most significant disruptive influence on the auto industry since the horse gave way to the car. The auto industry is going zero emissions. And by zero emissions, what I'm really saying is EV, electric vehicle. The speed of change was partially self-inflicted with the Dieselgate scandal, but the move to both cleaning up inner city air and reducing human impact on the environment is an inevitable route of travel. The route to EV is more disruptive on the industry than any other event in its history, since it opens the closed shop to newcomers. The technology is far simpler than the internal combustion engine, and the EV allows easier entry for the digital disruption led by the tech companies. Ironically, despite the substantial overcapacity and excess number of brands, the barriers to entry are lower than ever, hence the rise in the startup EV manufacturers in China and the United States. So we go into a decade of change. Legislators reflecting the demands of a changing generation that require clean transportation. Customers with new values and demanding changes in the way that we travel. Technology that is disruptive and a startup culture that is capable of wobbling the establishment. The auto industry will describe these trends in their normal four-letter acronyms. For example, CASE, connected, autonomous, shared, and emission-free. This is superficially how the industry deals with the threat. But in reality, the investment in transforming the portfolio to EV is enormous and will have a material impact on each car maker's bottom line over the coming years. Some manufacturers, for example, have guided us to expect a 30% reduction in EBIT to pay for the investments. The reality might be even greater. And the change has started to gain real momentum. In 2019, the number of light electric vehicles reached 2.26 million units. That's a 9% growth over 2018. Now, this was slower than the previous 6 years, which were between 46 and 69% growth. And the reason for this shift was due to the decrease in sales in the second half of 2019 in the two largest markets of China and the United States. But even with the stagnant growth in those two markets, global EV sales still grew, largely due to Europe, which saw a 44% growth. This could be attributed to the introduction of the WLTP, along with changes in national vehicle taxation and, of course, grants. Now, briefly turning to public transport, forecasts indicate that approximately 40% of new city buses registered in Europe by 2025 will be battery electric. Currently, the Netherlands has been the quickest to adopt electric buses in Europe, and of course, globally, China is far ahead. The Clean Vehicle Directive, or CVD, will be one of the biggest drivers for the adoption of zero-emission buses across Europe. The CVD states that public authorities should procure a minimum number of zero-emission vehicles, the exact percentage of which varies by country. The UK, along with other developed European countries like Germany, have the highest targets, whilst Romania has the lowest. The CVD states that between 2021 and 2025, 45% of buses procured in the UK should be clean, which increases to 65% between 2026 and 2030. 50% of clean buses should be zero emission. In 2019, Europe secured 60 billion euros in investment to produce EVs and batteries, 19 times more than in 2018. Driven by EU car CO2 targets, industry and governments committed to 3.5 times more to EVs and batteries in Europe than did China. the industry geared up to meet the 95 gram CO2 per kilometre targets for 2020-21. In 2019, over 30 new and improved BEV and PHEV models were introduced, which will push EV sales in this year and next. Now, naturally, amid a COVID-19 issue, the outlook for 2020 global EV sales becomes more difficult. However, the preliminary EV sales data is positive. But keep in mind that as of 2019, only 2.5% of the world's passenger vehicles ran on electricity. This would suggest that we still have a long road ahead, and it will profoundly impact the industry. So the car industry is changing under the most turbulent pressures in 100 years. And then you add a pandemic and a global recession. Massive change is inevitable. What does it all mean for the automotive industry in the United Kingdom? Well, mostly it's bad news if we continue on our current course. And regrettably, there are those voices that you'll hear saying it's a dead industry and not worth saving. Seriously. This is in spite of the fact that the industry employs 823,000 people in the United Kingdom, has a turnover of around £82 billion and an added value to the UK economy of £19 billion. Now, the UK produced around 1.3 million cars in 2019, incidentally, the lowest volume since 2010. This marked the third consecutive year of falling production from a peak of 1.72 million in 2016. This against a broadly static new car sales in the UK of about 2.3 million and a decline in the number of cars exported from the UK to around 1 million. This level of production means that the UK is no longer in the top 10 countries. In fact, it's 16th behind the Czech Republic. And it means that we make half the number of cars than compared with Spain or compared with France. And we make about 1/4 of the number of cars that Germany makes. Or put in another way, we represent about 1% of the total annual car production in the world. If UK Limited were a company, you'd look at these figures, note that you're losing market share, and you'd act. You'd also note that the number of people employed in the UK industry is still growing, and therefore efficiency is reducing, and therefore an inevitable cull will follow. So, what's the cause? What's making us uncompetitive? Well, where do you start? Lack of government support, Brexit, supply chain, ownership, skill shortage, COVID-19, the list potentially goes on. It's true that beyond the pandemic, other more familiar challenges remain. Ongoing trade tensions, environmental pressures, technology shifts, and for the UK and our closest trading partners, Brexit and the looming end of the transition period. The outcome of these negotiations will be fundamental to our sector's ability to recover from the chaos wrought by COVID-19 and to its long-term viability. UK automotive is built on firm foundations with a rich heritage of innovation, luxury know-how, and cutting-edge engineering. It is agile, flexible, and fundamentally competitive with the world's leading levels of efficiency. In 2019, the sector generated more than 100 billion in total trade for the third consecutive year, highlighting its role as a global trading powerhouse, and held the lead as Britain's biggest exporter of goods by a considerable margin. Exporting vehicles, engines, and components to more than 150 countries worldwide across all continents, the sector is key to the UK's international trade agenda and supports thousands of highly skilled, highly valued jobs across all regions. The vast majority of UK produced automotive goods exported overseas are destined for the EU, and some 7 out of 10 vehicles by UK consumers come from factories in the bloc. Securing a comprehensive free trade agreement with our largest trading partner is paramount. The sudden imposition of tariffs, just as the sector strives to restart and recover from the current crisis, would be catastrophic, as I'll explain later. Furthermore, if we are to retain the preferential trade we currently enjoy with other key markets around the world after the transition period ends, and capitalize on future global growth, we need deals with these countries agreed in parallel. How quickly automotive recovers from the shock of the pandemic will be decisive for Britain's overall recovery and future prosperity, global influence and reputation. As well as potentially creating further skilled jobs, the sector might be able to be among the leaders in technological development and drive the transition to the zero carbon economy. Yet, we have to overcome the long-term systemic issues for which there is no singular answer and are not caused by issues just starting yesterday. I will argue, and have argued, that the issue for the UK is that we don't own our own auto companies. They are almost 100% owned by foreign manufacturers. We can trace this back to the 70s and 80s, where successive governments refused to intervene into failing companies such as Austin Rover, or failed to stop foreign acquisition of companies like JLR. Free market principles, I hear you say, and you're right, yes, it's true. The industry that I grew up in had an awful union relation, terrible management, lousy productivity and quality, and in some respects is deserving of its own fate. But the same was largely true of the French auto industry, where, for example, Renault is 15% state-owned and PSA is 14% owned. The US auto industry, where the federal government took over GM and Chrysler in March 2009 with an $80.7 billion bailout. And even the Japanese auto industry is protected through the use of non-tariff trade barriers. All were and are protected. None were or will be allowed to fail. Why? Because the auto industry is fundamental to the manufacturing infrastructure of this country and their country, and thus to its ongoing wealth. Let me put it another way. Each of our competitor countries has an industrial strategy that includes a specific focus on automotive, and which is tangible and which they adhere to. But in the UK, the laissez-faire approach prevails, even into the COVID-19 crisis, where bailout stimuli packages provided in places like Germany and France have not been replicated in the UK. Beyond the emotion and politicking, let's get back to hard facts and the fundamentals of making a car. The ingredients of maintaining and growing production in a country are as follows. Firstly, home country. This is probably the only emotional or political factor at play in deciding where to locate a car's production country. There will always be pressure to invest in the home market and fill the home factories. It's a natural disadvantage for us. Let's not underestimate the impact of free trade between Japan and the EU. By removing the need to meet local content requirements, the removal of tariffs, then the advantage of manufacturing in the UK is partially removed. One might speculate that we already start to see the consequences of these actions. I give you Honda. Don't expect this to create mass closures overnight. Decisions on manufacturing locations tend to be made according to platform evolutions rather than car by car. But whether it is free trade agreements, Brexit, or corporate focus on Europe, we cannot deny that foreign-owned car makers are steadily reducing their reliance on the UK. However, ownership is not something we can fix, so let's move on to something that we can. TDC. Now let's move to the logical side of our brain and what drives sourcing decisions. Sourcing decisions are primarily driven by economic rationale. Where is the cheapest place to build the car? And one can give that decision logic many names, but let me call it TDC, or total delivered cost. What's that? This is the cost of buying all the parts of the car and their logistic and tariff cost to reach the factory, the transformation cost in the factory, and then the logistics and tariff costs to reach the dealerships. I think we all know that margins on new cars are very small, at best 6 to 8%, including sales financing and optional accessories. The margin on the base car is often, at best, 0. Therefore, even minor variations in the TDC makeup has a profound effect on profitability. Most, if not all, of the plants in the UK are very efficient when operating at close to full capacity. They have enjoyed great success because of this efficiency in that transformation process, in spite of the fact that, on average, only 44% of the car is sourced in the UK. One assumes that this production efficiency will continue. So the question that gets raised is therefore twofold. Firstly, does a hard Brexit, or a Brexit of any sort, add a tariff, increasing the cost of parts by 2 to 4% and the cost of cars exported to Europe by 10%? It should be noted that these assumed tariffs might be even greater if UK local content is not raised from that 44% to at least 55%. Adding a 4% tariff to circa 50% of the parts and a 10% tariff to 80% of the finished cars wipes out any advantage of efficiency and turns marginally profitable vehicles into ones that are profoundly negative. Secondly, and at least in the case of Japanese, production in the UK is directly in competition with its Japanese mother factory. The Japanese factories will no longer have the disadvantage of import tariffs, but will enjoy the advantage of lower inbound logistics and higher production efficiency, of course, offset by higher outbound costs. The UK advantage is reduced or eliminated. Now let's turn to research and development. R&D is sticky. Its stickiness is a great asset in downturns. Look at Formula One. Formula One stays in the UK because the expertise is here. R&D will always be located close to mother plants, and advanced engineering tends to be trialed close to the engineering centres of auto companies. But here in the UK, where we have great universities and conceptual research, we do not have the sufficient interest or skill to take research through to practical applications. Our investment community doesn't reward long-term investments in technology, and our supply base has gone elsewhere, thus depriving us of the ability to work close with natural partners. The failure of the apprentice levy is a further reminder of the need to embed the development of engineering and manufacturing skills into a coherent strategy for the country. We can measure the skills and the productivity gap. We know the UK in general is not just poor, it's bad. Our GVA per employee, or gross value add, is worse than US, Japan, Germany, Italy, and France. This is not commensurate with what we imagine from our working hours perspective, but you can't argue with the maths. Getting to the root cause isn't easy, particularly as the data is skewed by London, but essentially lack of investment in automation, in infrastructure, and in skills training all play a role. And while the UK automotive OEMs are very efficient, the UK supply chain and infrastructure falls into this GVA concern. This is no more obvious than when looking at the automotive supply chain. As I've already said, the average UK content in the UK of a UK produced car is 44%. The majority of the rest comes inbound from Europe. The UK supply base isn't sticky and has largely withdrawn to the continent. Finally, technology. In times of change, new technology can stimulate the downstream process. There will always be an incentive to do R&D where there is expertise. And as I said, R&D is sticky and in turn brings production. So, is it all bad? Well, bad news does not always connote a negative meaning. It can, in fact, help augment and make us critically think about ways to overcome the challenges. Frankly, I've been brutal in my assessment of where we are today. Well, because as a free agent I can, and because we need to face the startling facts. As the coronavirus crisis begins to dial back and government help to nurture, or the government helps to nurture the nation back to economic growth, it is the UK automotive industry that can be an engine room of success. The next few months will be crucial for determining its future. We need a detailed picture of future growth markets and the UK's current ability to serve them. We need to set out key recommendations to help policymakers and the industry grow existing trade relationships and unlock new markets, keeping this vital sector at the heart of the UK's future trade strategy. Let me give a few pointers on how we can jointly help improve the position of the UK automotive industry as we recover from COVID-19. Firstly, with a new generation of clean automotive vehicles and technologies on the horizon, government and industry should work together to understand what position as a nation we want to play and ensure that our domestic market is consistent with that desire. Over-ambitious banning of technologies, and I refer here, of course, to the banning of the internal combustion engine, for example, rather than stimulating the development of synthetic fuels. This will not create innovation. Neither is it a good foundation for global exports, nor will it stimulate a vibrant domestic market. Transparent government trade ambitions, the publication of a bilateral trade mandate, and ensuring consistent formal business engagement structures are necessary measures to secure business buy-in. The Automotive Sector Panel Expert Trading Advisory Group, long title, and the SMMT, as experienced exporters of goods, can help inform the UK trade strategy. Government, industry, the SMMT should strengthen cross-departmental collaboration. This will ensure efforts to support industry and economic prosperity in the regions, make sure that they are being delivered according to the UK's strategic interest in a sustainable manner for UK trade. UK automotive businesses need to identify and map vulnerabilities in their existing business model. Immediate support for automotive businesses to restart UK manufacturing, incentivize customer demand, and aid UK economic recovery is a necessary intervention by the government. Investors want to be assured that we have a government that wants them and supports them for the long term, and not just to get them over the line. It's important that support mechanisms work for the whole automotive industry, for production, through to retail and aftermarket. And long-term support should allow UK automotive to maintain its pre-COVID-19 international competitiveness. And in this regard, government should take note of aid provided by European governments to their domestic industries. In the long term, we do need a materially relevant industrial strategy that sets forth greater intervention. Proper and substantial investment in new energy technology. I note that Germany and France are investing £3 billion in automotive batteries to create the battery equivalent of Airbus, while the equivalent initiative in the UK, whilst welcome, is £750 million. Intervention in the process to promote UK research through into commercial applications. I'm sure you know, but did you know that the lithium-ion battery was invented by a British scientist called Stanley Whittingham? But it's been exploited in China, Korea, and Japan. There are numerous examples like this, and we have to improve the support for startups that carry concepts through to genuine business applications. We need to nurture the industry that the UK has. Specialist companies like Aston Martin, McLaren and Lotus, plus the very important role that Formula One and motorsports plays in advanced technologies. There's a clear tendency to support only when it's too late and view them as insignificant because they don't employ enough people. We need to build the infrastructure for electric and autonomous cars to exist. Make the UK the most open destination to the utilisation of this technology. Encourage the establishment of sticky R&D centres to exploit that UK openness. Reorientate the failed apprenticeship levy. Allow the money to be spent both on academic training and, most importantly, on the on-the-job training. Make it advantageous to train the future generation rather than the tax that it blatantly is today. In the same vein, value the STEM subjects at school and create interest and motivate young people to strive for an apprenticeship or study for a career in the UK automotive industry. The UK industry is blighted by a lack of gender and race diversity, and it has to act with schools to address this. And finally, don't legislate or burden your domestic industry out of existence. Find solutions when they come asking for help. Don't force them overseas into the waiting arms of other governments. We need to value and assist what we have. While the global automotive industry is going through a major shift in the way vehicles are manufactured, powered and driven, the UK auto industry faces the added pressures of economic uncertainty. However, this presents a number of opportunities that the industry can explore. With sustained investment in innovation and alignment between government and industry, the UK automotive industry has the chance to ensure a more stable future. The future need not be bleak. We still have incredible talent in the country, but we have to face facts and we have to act. We need to invest in these skills and address our productivity. We need to make the UK an attractive place to trade with and export from. But more than anything else, we need to value the industry that we have and the role that it has played in serving and has to play in serving future generations. During the COVID-19 crisis, we as a populace were able to turn to our automotive manufacturers and ask for some unprecedented help to design and produce ventilators and PPE in next to no time. Automotive manufacturers bared their metal and responded. That's what having smart and well-trained people can do. Remember, once it's lost, it's gone forever. Let's keep our automotive industry safe and vibrant. Thank you. I'm now able to take questions.
Great, thank you for that, Andy. A really in-depth analysis of the current state of the automotive sector in the UK. And that comment also comes from Emma Martin, who said, very helpful outline to the current situation of the auto industry. Thank you, Andy. So we have a fair few questions to get through, so we'll get through as many as possible. So let's get straight to it. Our first question comes from Prabdeep Wala from Configit Ltd. And Prabdeep says, I would like to ask Andy if he thinks there will be more consolidation in the automotive industry. In recent months, we've seen the likes of PSA and FCA getting together, but we can see a traditional car manufacturer and perhaps a software company or a different kind of company consolidating assets with a car manufacturer.
Yeah, there's inevitably going to be, but through any period of change, then obviously you see consolidation and cooperations. Actually, a lot already exists. For example, I'm sure we all know that Nissan, Mitsubishi, and Renault collaborate, kind of. You're right about the coming together of PSA and FSA. Did you know, for example, that Mercedes and BMW, that are big competitors, actually collaborate in the purchase of parts? So inevitably, there will be further consolidation of the industry. It looks glacial, but if you think about the level of change in the last 10 years, it's been quite big. But I also think, and I'm sure that you'll see collaboration between tech companies and car companies. In the first instances, of course, car companies saw them simply as a threat and barriered against them. But you start to see now collaboration between the likes of Waymo and I'm sure other companies like Amazon, where there's mutual intent. And let's be honest, some of the best companies, tech companies like Waymo, are way ahead of the auto industry in terms of autonomous vehicles and the move in that direction, albeit perhaps as a supplier or a collaborator with. So yes, it's a really exciting time to be in the auto industry, although it can be a bit stressful at moments. But that turbulence and change will end up in the betterment of transportation for the consumer, I am certain.
Great, thanks for that, Andy. So our next question comes from Graham Belgium, who is a fellow colleague of yours at Optare Group Ltd. He asks, what impact would a Buy British campaign have, and if it would make a difference, how can we get the government behind it? And when they are more worried about trade deals?
Look, the great campaign that the UK government runs is really, really good, and it does that really, really well. Would a Buy British campaign help? I think as long as we're making sure that the vehicles that we're producing are as good as anywhere else, then basically it's not a bad thing to appeal to nationalistic instincts, I suppose. It's certainly true in other countries, and I give you Japan, where everything bar the premium cars are basically bought from domestic manufacturers. You shouldn't need it. I mean, to be honest, we should be making cars that are more competitive than anybody else's. But I think it's certainly worth noting. Anybody thinking of buying a car, I think it's worth them noting, where was it made? It's not always obvious, to be frank, but I think it should be. I think it should be one of the factors in considering where you buy from. And I think that's even more true as you go towards, let's say, sectors which are dealing with public money. And I'm thinking here of things like obviously the train and bus sectors, where it's taxpayers' money that's being used. And I think absolutely in those instances that Buy British is even more important.
Great, thank you for that, Andy. Great answer.
I just add, Buy British should be a tagline for best quality. That's where you want to get to.
Most definitely, I agree. So our next question comes from James Charlotte, who is from Concilium Recruit, and he asks, with the emergence of recent automotive startups and the rapid success of Tesla, does Andy see the future of the UK automotive sector being shaped by the new entrants rather than the established big players?
I think it's established by both. Look, a lot of the startups fail. In terms of car startups, the only one I can think of in the UK would be Dyson, which is unfortunately not worked out. A lot of the startups from China have stumbled. I give you, Faraday Future, Neo, etc. are struggling. So it's a tough business to be in, and I think in startups you have to recognize, whilst the electrical powertrain is far simpler than a combustion engine, you still need to wrap a car around it, and you still need to make a car, and therefore those traditional skills of ride and handling, NVH, good looks, and manufacturing a car are still very prevalent, and quite often I think those startups underestimate it. However, there will be a number of startups that definitely will make it, and I give you Tesla, which is the most valuable car company in the world right now. Many people, I would say most people in the auto industry would have betted against Tesla five years ago, probably even 2 years ago, but they keep proving the industry wrong. And I'm sure that Tesla is not the only one, and I'm sure the industry is better for it, because whilst I would argue that as the head of the electric vehicle in Nissan in my days there, I'd argue that we started the trend of electric vehicles. There's no doubt that we wouldn't be where we are today talking about electric vehicles becoming the dominant force had it not been for Tesla. And I think that remains true for companies like Rivian and Lucid that will help drive that across the line. And I think as a result, we get better connected vehicles, we get better autonomous vehicles. So it's a kind of, it's an environment that the competition creates a better breed. It's a Darwinism that I think is really, really good.
Great, thanks for that, Andy. And I think this next question really fits in with the question we just had a moment ago. And this comes from Guy Charteris, who says, does the shift in electric vehicles present a threat or opportunity to UK tier suppliers?
Depends how you look at it. Honestly, it could be a huge threat. We don't have yet any battery making capability in the UK, bar what exists in Sunderland. We need to invest. Which comes first, the horse or the carriage? Basically, which comes first, the car or the battery plant? Doesn't matter. It's the chicken and the egg. You have to invest in battery facilities. There's a reason why Germany and France are investing so heavily, because they recognize they need to have the batteries in the country because batteries don't travel well. So I think it's an opportunity on one hand. Given the tremendous change that's coming, it's an opportunity to center electric production in the UK and be a powerhouse in electric. On the other hand, if you sit on your backside and you watch it go by, then it becomes a threat. And I think the gist of my keynote today is that we need to stand up, recognize the threat, and as we've done in the past, basically move forward and start investing properly in our new automotive industry, which is predominantly around the care that I talked about, but really around EV, connected and autonomous.
Great, thanks for that, Andy. And Guy also just put in the chat that he thanks you for that as well. So our next question comes from Alex Chung, who's put in quite a few questions. So we'll get to the one first, Alex, and then if we have time at the end, we'll get to the others. So Alex asks, do you find there is too much overlap in capability with the various catapult centres and innovation hubs, in brackets, not focused and generic?
I'll get myself into trouble now.
We can move on to the next question.
No. First of all, I appreciate that the catapults exist. I appreciate that we have a mechanism. So that's good and to be encouraged. And some of the catapults do some really, really good work. No question. I'm thinking of MTC, for example, in Coventry, Birmingham, the really, really good expertise in manufacturing technology. As a chief executive of a car company, which I was until a few months ago, and as chairman of Optare, which I am right now, I have to say that I look at the catapults around the country, and I'm confused. I'm confused how to approach them and deal with them and have them focus on my particular issues. Maybe that's my problem. I don't know. But over the period since I came back from Japan, which is 6 years, I've struggled with working with the catapults and unveiling or utilizing their full potential. It's too bureaucratic. It's not clear where they sit in, and they basically are sometimes too narrow in the way that they're addressing the funding needs of the company. I take, Aston isn't all about electric cars. It has other technologies. I alluded to the fact that we're tending to ignore research in synthetic fuels, which could be another alternative to hydrogen and batteries, but we're letting that technology get developed outside the country. We shouldn't. We should have a much more speculative approach to research. So the catapults are good, but could be improved.
Great, thanks for that, Andy. And if you guys could stick around, we have 2 more questions to get through today. We've already hit 45 minutes past 12, but I'm sure, Andy, are you happy to answer the next 2 questions?
Sure.
That's great, thanks. So the next question comes from Andy Thomas, and he asks, do you think public transport, including buses, will change forever now after the COVID-19 pandemic? And with more, sorry, I just had another question come through, so it popped out the way. So, and with more companies allowing people to work from home, and if so, how will this change?
Look, I think inevitably transportation changes, full stop. Whether it's due to the technological push, whether it's due to the change in generation, whether it's due to the pandemic, but the mix of all that means that transportation has to change. I think we were already much more cognizant of the need for cleaner transportation. If you think about the particulate in cities, 50% of the particulates in the middle of cities comes from public transportation, be it taxis or buses. The easiest way to address that is through changing public transport to pure electric, no emissions. And I think we have to accelerate that. I know that we have in the intention of doing that, but we have to do it quicker than I've alluded to in my keynote speech. Getting to 60% EV buses by 2030, I don't think is quick enough. And I think that's just where you put the pressure. Whereas I would say electric buses should go quicker. At the same breath, I'm also saying that we should be open to other types of solutions like synthetic fuels, so that you can have a balance of various technologies. But I think public transport is a priority because it has the biggest single impact in removing particulates from city centres, and that of course impacts on people's health. And I think we all enjoyed what clean air feels like during the COVID crisis.
Of course. Thanks for that, Andy. So we just have one more question. We did have a couple come in just a moment ago, but unfortunately we don't have time to answer those. So we'll get this question answered, and then just after I'll mention virtual drinks where you guys could potentially have the chance to chat with Andy. So our next question and final question comes from an anonymous attendee who asks, is the government deferring / uncertainty on Brexit harming the automotive industry and stopping investment?
Look, I don't think it's controversial to say that the uncertainty around Brexit, for whatever reason, without blaming anybody, it is what it is. The country has chosen to leave the EU. That's a decision by the people. That's it, done. But the uncertainty around what that form takes has and is, without question, deferring investment. And sometimes you can only defer so far. So in deferring so far, it does mean that we're losing investment. That's a fact. That's a fact. So, we obviously have until the end of the year to get through the transition period. It's really, really important that we get that solved, that car companies, bus companies, transportation companies, they can deal with facts, even bad facts. What they can't deal with is uncertainty. So, we need to make it clear what's our future trading relationship with the EU. Does it include or exclude tariffs? Let's hope that it excludes. But the sooner that we can get to a solution, the better. And by the way, tariffs are bad, full stop. They're bad for the European manufacturers, and they're bad for the UK manufacturers. Remember, tariffs work in both directions. They to some extent count each other out, but they're just bad news. It's friction, and you don't want friction in a trading relationship. And the automotive industry, whether we like it or not, is a global industry, and therefore I sincerely hope that that by the end of this year, our trading relationship with Europe is resolved, and hopefully we're using the cloud with the silver lining. The silver lining is the trade agreements with other countries, which could be a big bonus to the auto industry.
Of course. Thanks, Andy. And thank you for doing this presentation with us today. It's been an amazing event yet again. We've had some really kind comments from people. Rob Ellis says, thank you, Andy, a very clear and informative presentation. Alona says, amazing webinar. And Charlotte White says, absolutely fantastic webinar. So I think we had a really high engagement today, and thank you again for doing this presentation with us. Before we finish today, I just wanted to say that we have virtual drinks at 3 p.m. I have put the link in the chat there, so if you'd like to attend, please click on the link there, where you may have the opportunity to talk with Andy if he has time to attend that today. A couple of other things as well. We have a bike competition going on our LinkedIn pages, so make sure you post your favourite stand, tag three members along with that, and you have the chance of winning a Brompton bike worth £750. So definitely worth it if you're able to take part in that. So just to finish off, I'd like to thank you once again, Andy, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you very much, and I'll try and get to the virtual drinks.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.